Hi, this is Denise.
Hey, this is Maggie.
Welcome to our podcast, Candor and Courage at Work.
Denise and I have known each other for a long time, a couple of decades, HR pros, and we thought it might be helpful if we got together and shared some of the things that we've learned along the way.
That's right, Maggie. Many struggle with being candid and being courageous, and we just want to use what we've learned to help you use those traits in your daily work life.
Here's hoping that makes you more successful. And here we go. Hey, Denise, last time we got together, you provided some great step-by-step instructions for folks on how to effectively practice candor. And that prompted a question from one of our listeners. Mm-hmm. So we're grateful to Mandy for reaching out with a question and wanting to understand how to engage with someone that you know is conflict avoidant. So going into a conversation where you want to provide training, feedback, coaching, and you know as you're going in that this listener is conflict avoidant, how can you approach that?
So the defensiveness is the walls are just going to go up immediately as soon as the conversation starts.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm Mandy, first of all, thank you for a great question because, gosh, conflict avoidance, I have a hard time with that myself.
I think most of us are naturally conflict avoidant.
Well, what I mean is I have a hard time with people who don't want to embrace the change. Okay. Because I am not conflict avoidant. In my work life, I'm just like, we got a problem. Let's not worry about who's at fault. Let's just get it fixed and we can talk about how to avoid it occurring going forward. So your colleague or the person you work with is just automatically conflict avoidant. I guess I'm going to go back to the episode and talk about that pre-work, okay? Mm-hmm. And especially if somebody's conflict avoidant, I just don't think you're going to be able to go right to the steps of candor without building the relationships and setting the stage for, I'm going to be candid with you when things are going well, and I'm going to be candid with you when I see things that need improvement. Okay.
Foundational to that, yes.
Right. And I'm going to give you a little bit of specific advice here because sometimes I feel like when I'm dealing with somebody, they look at it through the lens of the relationship of that we share, okay? And what I want to do is almost take that person out of that framework or that perspective and turn it into, if I saw something that was wrong or that was harmful, should I say something?
Ah, okay.
Would you?
Right.
Would you do that too? And I feel like when they don't know it's about them, and then I believe the natural tendency would be to say, yes, I would say something. If it was harmful, I would say something. You might get it depends, and say, okay, well, if somebody was doing something that was bad for them, that's not in a social situation. Like, I don't want to get into habits or lifestyle, but if somebody was doing something that was really harming them professionally, do you feel like we owe feedback or we owe that person direction on that?
That's hard to say no to.
I think it is. And then you can lead right into, how would you feel about me if I saw something that you were doing that was harming you professionally here? Would you want me to be silent about it? Or would you want me to share my thoughts with the intention of helping you avoid that negative consequence?
Yep. I think that's a really brilliant way to address it because you're signaling to the person you should have this as an expectation because we all want to help each other. And my intent is to help you improve.
Correct.
So it's still going back to those basics that you covered. But I think it's really smart of Mandy to be in the headspace in knowing that that person is naturally conflict avoidant and wants to avoid uncomfortable conversations.
Correct. And to call them out on it, not brutally call them out. But I think there's a strategic way we can call people out on things. And another thing that I do in my world is I admit times when I'm conflict avoidant, which isn't very often. But if it would serve the purpose of delivering that feedback, I probably could come up with a scenario way in my past, or I could imagine one where I might be conflict avoidant and just own it that way so that it helps the listener understand, okay, that doesn't serve you when you don't want to hear things that can help you.
Yep. And so in doing that, you're demonstrating empathy.
Correct. And the other thing too, and I know we need to move on, is perhaps that person should witness you, Mandy, being candid with somebody else and seeing that it's not horrible, that you're going to go into it with good intentions, with offering help and support for this person. And maybe that's the conversation starter of, how do you think I did? And maybe it can go into, well, now let's talk. I don't know. I don't know that I would do that. But seeing it being modeled with somebody else, that might make them a little less defensive and understand that you will be okay after this conversation.
Yeah. As long as you don't violate that cardinal rule, praise in public, criticize in private.
Correct.
And so I think you're on to something. It's just going to be a matter of mindfully navigating, where do those opportunities arise? How can I capitalize on this in a way that helps everybody on the team see that I'm prepared to step up and model the behavior that I want to see?
Right. And perhaps that I'm willing to accept it when somebody else is candid with me. That could help as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Mandy. Again, if you have any questions for Maggie or me, log into candorandcourageatwork.com and find that button and give us your questions. We love listener questions. So thank you so much. So today we're going to continue our discussion on courage and go into some specifics on how we can take the lessons that you shared with us in the prior episodes and apply them to our daily lives. So Maggie, take it away.
I'm jumping right in. and I know, as we embarked on this journey of speaking about candor and courage and creating the foundation for learning about each of them in the last few episodes, we've also talked about how do we enable our listeners to begin to practice those. And so that's really what I want to focus on today, is enabling our listeners to practice being courageous. When I was thinking about it, I thought for some reason about if you've ever taken swimming lessons, and many of us as kids took swimming lessons. The place that we did not start was climbing the tall ladder and jumping off the high diving board. And I think much in the same way you've laid foundationally the incremental steps that can be taken to build practicing candor are just as true in practicing courage. Correct. And they go hand in hand. You can't be candid with somebody without being courageous. But I think that we're just going to focus on taking those same kinds of steps and looking at opportunities for listeners to take calculated risks. Taking calculated risks is what builds that muscle. And so expanding those boundaries in low stakes situations. You're not going to go jump off the high dive or go jump off a bridge, but really practicing consistently over time, building that courage, experiencing it, and feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Yeah, I go back to, the episodes where you've shared courage with us, and it still resonates with me that we're not talking 100% large, giant acts of courage, that really, and like you said, you don't go into You don't go in the deep end of the pool when you're first learning to swim. And we all, with any new skill, should start to be intentional about how to be courageous and follow your steps on how to build that skill, build that muscle. So,
yeah. And each of the things that I'm going to touch on today are incremental things. They're steps. They are going to push you outside of your comfort zone a bit, but they're small things. And the first one is practicing speaking up in meetings. For a lot of folks in a public setting, I think we touched on that very early on in the podcast, of the number one fear that many of us have is not death, it's public speaking.
right.
And so as you're participating in meetings and you're listening to, what's being shared and so forth, if you've got a different opinion, respectfully share it or ask a thought-provoking question. Those are two small ways that you can really begin to overcome the fear, practice courage, and in doing so, develop a comfort level in providing that feedback. Most folks in meetings aren't there just to take information in. If it's just taking information in, you don't need a meeting. Handle that via email or a recorded video or some other way.
Yeah.
If the intent of the meeting is to truly collaborate and be thought partners with each other, then it does require folks that are in the meeting to step up and contribute.
So what I would suggest to our listeners is that when a meeting's coming, right? It's scheduled, hopefully. And the subject matter. And so I agree with you. I would encourage folks to come up, practice what they're going to say in the meeting. Because as being a leader in a meeting, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. When people are not participating or contributing, it makes me wonder if they're really engaged in their job or the company. So you really do need to speak up and find that sweet spot of how I can contribute mindfully and make myself look good, because that's the high stakes of speaking up at a workplace meeting. But just practice on where your subject matter for this meeting and figure out how to put that contribution in there. So we as the meeting leaders know you're engaged, and we want to hear from you too. We don't want to just talk. We want that dialogue, that back and forth. So
plus, you never know how your observation or feedback may spark ideas, may spark a different perspective for participants. So a lot of times what I have found is folks in meetings that don't speak up during the meeting have plenty to say, and they say it outside of the meeting.
Right.
So they'll grab a colleague that they're comfortable with and say, blah, 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 blah. And everybody that was in the meeting misses the benefit of that perspective. So, it's an easy way to build confidence. But I love your idea of making sure you're prepared for that and even practicing.
Yep.
Volunteering for stretch assignments is another way to get outside of your comfort zone and begin to build courage. So there's any number of examples, I'm sure, that both of us can think of where we stepped into handling things, assuming responsibility for things, sometimes being asked to, which is not volunteering.
Voluntolding.
We were voluntold to do this. And it was a stretch assignment. But taking on those new challenges that require learning and risk-taking also exercise courage. You don't know that you're going to be successful. So how can you prepare? What do you need to know? Who can you turn to for resources? How are you going to gauge success? And maybe that's one of the easiest questions to do at the front end, is ask, what does success look like in this assignment? So that you have clarity around what the end result or the outcome should be.
And see, I look at that too as an opportunity to build more relationships outside of my normal circle. And so I think the natural benefits to building those relationships is that if you are looking at your career path by getting to know more people and stepping up and doing something that's outside of what's expected of you, and doing it well. So I appreciate you sharing the need to, ask questions and make sure that being outside of your comfort zone, that you're, nailing it on the head. But you're building those relationships and you're putting yourself out there to be seen by other people as potential for new assignments, new promotions, things of that sort. And I would say too that as a lifelong learner, as we both are, just learning something new and different, what an ego or confidence builder that is to say, wow, I accomplished that. And maybe it puts me on a path to doing something else than I had intended with my career. It opens up my possibilities to be able to experience perhaps a different part of my job.
Yep. Or a different path altogether, to your point.
Correct.
To your point. So the next one is going to take a lot of courage. And it is very much in line with the whole concepts that you've been sharing around candor. And that's seeking out difficult feedback. Mm-hmm. So probably not best to start with someone that you know is just very, very critical, maybe of everybody that works with them, because that's their nature. They're not known for having an intent and desire to help people improve, but rather beating others down by being critical. So that's not what I'm talking about. Don't go to that person. Okay.
Consider the source.
Go to somebody that you think has the intent at heart of enabling someone to improve, and ask them, can you provide some feedback for me that you think would be helpful to me growing as a leader, to help me improve, to suggest areas that I might want to focus on? And then be prepared to hear them. And because you've asked, also be prepared to have follow-up questions to make sure that you really understand what they're seeing or what their perceptions are around your behavior or around your performance. But try your level best to not be defensive because you asked.
Right.
Try very hard to not be disagreeable. I don't think it would be out of line to clarify, and we've talked a lot about intent. I don't think it would be out of line to identify that the impact didn't align with your intent. So if they saw you reacting a certain way and they perceived that it was something that made you angry, for example, you could clarify that the intent was to show that you were confused, and maybe that came across wrong in your facial expressions, because there's so much communication that happens non-verbally. And that's where, like emails, people read tone into it.
Yes.
They misinterpret what is that person experiencing. And so I'm not saying sit there and just take it all and accept it, that it's, the truth. It is that person's version of the truth. And so you can engage in that conversation.
Yeah, I feel like you really need to choose your mentors, choose the people who can serve you best with their advice. That I see people that, I trust. And to your point, not the first example, but the second one, where I believe this person has my best interest at heart and will give me good advice. And some of it will hit the mark and some of it won't. And you need to consider all the feedback you get. But I do strongly suggest people to be careful about the folks that they are seeking that input from. If they're modeling the behavior, so if somebody is speaks up and I have trouble speaking up, I want to talk to the person who doesn't have trouble speaking up and get advice from them. And I know we're talking about seeking feedback, difficult feedback, but that, I think, in my opinion, is the same mentality of pick the people who are gonna be truthful with you. Because, if I went to somebody that I have in my mind, I don't believe that person would tell me what I needed to hear.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's really critical. Those three things: practicing speaking up in meetings, volunteering for stretch assignments, seeking out difficult feedback, and even reflecting on past acts of courage. There are lots of examples in our respective careers, some of which we shared, that required us to step up. And sometimes thinking about those, thinking about what went well, thinking about what didn't go well, what would you do differently? And trying to take a not in the moment experience and look back on it to see what lessons were learned.
Yeah, I agree. I think our best wisdom comes from time and distance. So for our listeners, because Maggie and I talk a lot, about our past experiences. So I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask you, what can you share? I know you can share an example, but will you share an example of a time when you've had to overcome fear or take a risk to do what you felt was right?
Yeah, I was thinking about this episode, and for some reason, an experience that I had within a couple of months of moving to Chattanooga came to mind. And so this is 30 years ago, or, 30 years ago this fall anyway. And I was in a manufacturing operation with a product line that included built-in computers, built-in PCs. And things were going swimmingly until an employee came in to me and had missed work and said that they were living out of their car at a local park. Financial issues, had gotten evicted and so forth. And ultimately shared with me that part of their financial strains came as a result of not being able to make payments to a coworker who had sold them a computer.
Okay.
And I thought that was strange.
I'm living in a car because I owe a coworker money. Tell me more.
Yeah. I was just like, well, help me understand the tie-in here. And at the end of the day, the tie-in was we learned that we had an employee who was stealing the computers that were designed for the company's product, reconfiguring them, and selling them to coworkers on a payment plan. Yeah. Not just one, many. And in fact, knowing that I'm probably best known again for my moral courage and doing what's right, I made the recommendation, and we subsequently called the police. They came in and investigated it and ultimately arrested the individual. So while I applaud the entrepreneurial spirit in whole,
I was going to say interesting business model, but no.
Yeah, it was, it was clearly company property.
Yes.
That was being taken and then sold to coworkers. And so this employee who stepped forward because of the personal crisis they were experiencing revealed that.
Can you imagine the courage it took him or her to say, I'm living in my car, because just divulging something so personal. I mean, but then to also share that they were taken advantage of, or they outed a wrongdoing.
Yeah.
So what enabled you to find courage in that situation?
Well, I had to understand the motivations and mindset around acts of courage and where I was at in building my reputation, not only within the organization, but within the community. There was an immediate sense of knowing what was right. That is that moral courage. But I also knew that if I failed that, I'd be failing myself. And so as an HR professional, I've always said, really, the only thing that I have is my own credibility. Mm-hmm. And I knew if I couldn't look myself in the eye, in the mirror, I couldn't expect all of those folks that I worked with, because there was no way that was going to stay hidden.
Right. And so, I mean, I guess for me, I know your moral courage, I know your moral convictions, but I wonder what it would have said to that person if you had stayed silent and not done anything with it. If you had played it safe.
Yeah, if I had played it safe, well, one, I would have left the organization, because I always said if I lost my credibility, I would just walk away. I was too new in the organization and into the community. I'm not even sure it ever occurred to me that there was a choice.
Yeah, I don't see you mulling that over. But for some of our listeners, that might be, they know what they need to do, but to find the courage to do it, may be difficult. And I'm sure for you early on in your career, how did acting courageously, despite the risk, impact your self-confidence or your reputation, with that organization and the people around you?
Well, I felt good about it because I knew it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So that was the easy part. What I didn't realize were two things. One, there were a good number of employees that were feeling stressed by making payments to this individual, knowing that they were paying for company equipment.
Oh, so they knew it was the company equipment.
Yeah, it was pretty recognizable.
Company name on it. Sorry,
Yeah, no, it didn't have that. But, when you get a bunch of computers in that are supposed to go onto product, and then all of a sudden your coworker's going, hey, I got this great deal for you.
Yeah.
It was pretty obvious. So I didn't really have an appreciation for the undercurrent of stress that it would relieve by taking that step. I was proud of being able to demonstrate my moral courage in doing the right things. But I was also unprepared for how unpopular the decision made me.
Oh, really? Okay.
So for all those folks that loved Tommy, and that is his real name, they felt like it was just going too far for the company to press charges.
Okay.
And to seek conviction. I personally had no problem. To me, there's right and wrong, and stealing is wrong. And, ultimately he did do a plea deal, and he got no jail time, and his record was expunged after 3 years. And just out of curiosity, I did look at, where he landed a few years later, and he was working for IBM. So clearly I did not harm his career.
Yeah.
And then I let go of it. But
he loved computers.
I guess so. He's quite adept at selling.
Yeah.
So hopefully he did go on to lead a successful life and learned a lesson early on that was less painful than it could have been. So my intent in sharing the story, and thanks for asking, is, how do you ask these reflective questions? How can that help serve as a guide for fully processing how being courageous paid off?
Yeah.
And understanding, what were the drivers behind it? What types of courage did you employ? What were the positive outcomes, and maybe some unintended consequences? I didn't expect to have so many people mad at me for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, by personalizing your own journey of courage, it highlights that practicing it is within your control, that you can create value in a way of thinking about it that is really concrete and helps build it. And that's the whole intent, is to engage in questions, to engage in stretch assignments, to speaking out and speaking up in meetings, and then reflecting on those kinds of things. And it doesn't have to be as big as uncovering theft and deception and calling the police. It can be a small thing that still contributes to building the skill and providing an opportunity for the self-reflection.
Yeah, it just feels like the ability to be proud of myself, to be able to look myself in the mirror and know that I've done the right thing, not just with theft, but, I did the right thing by my company by contributing in meetings. I've done the right thing by my career or my own personal enrichment, perhaps by engaging in those stretch assignments. Just the ability to lay your head down at night or get up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm doing right by myself. I'm doing right by the people in my world. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think we're really grateful for the question from Mandy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really going to provide some insight and thought for folks. We invite more questions from our listeners.
Right.
Just go to candorandcourageatwork.com and click on the link to leave us a question or provide feedback.
Or just give us a story of how you've used some of the steps or advice we've given you on Candor and Courage, and let us know how it's working for you.
I'd love to hear that.
I would too.
And I'd be delighted to share some of those successes and talking about it Tuesday on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today for Candor and Courage at Work.
We hope you found some inspiration and encouragement in today's episode.
For more information or to connect with us, visit our website, candorandcourageatwork.com, and be sure to download future episodes wherever you listen.